Inflation is not coming back because people suddenly started spending too much again. Inflation is coming back because war is no longer staying on the battlefield. It is moving through oil routes, shipping lanes, food supply chains, and straight into your daily life. For a while, people believed the worst of inflation was over. Central banks tightened policy, prices cooled from their peaks, and the world started acting like the crisis had passed. But now a new danger is rising, and this time, it is not being driven by consumer demand, it is being driven by conflict. And that makes it far more unpredictable, far more dangerous, and much harder to control. Here is the truth most people miss. In a global economy, war does not stay local. If conflict erupts near a major energy producing region or near the shipping routes that carry oil, gas, and goods across the world, the economic shock spreads instantly. It does not matter if the fighting is thousands of miles away from your home. If it affects energy, transport, or trade, it affects your wallet. The first place the damage shows up is oil. Oil is still the bloodstream of the global economy. Trucks run on it, cargo ships depend on it, planes burn it, factories rely on energy linked to it. When war threatens oil production or creates fear around supply, markets react immediately. Even before actual shortages happen, traders start pricing in the risk. And that fear alone can send prices higher. Once oil moves up, everything starts moving with it. Fuel becomes more expensive, transportation costs rise, deliveries cost more, businesses face higher operating expenses, and when businesses pay more to move goods, store goods, or produce goods, consumers end up paying more too. That is how a geopolitical conflict turns into a grocery bill problem. And it does not stop there. The second wave hits global shipping. When sea routes become dangerous, ships are forced to reroute. That means longer journeys, higher fuel costs, delayed deliveries, higher insurance costs, and more pressure on global freight. A ship that cannot use the fastest route has to burn more money getting the same cargo to the same destination. And when that happens across hundreds or thousands of shipments, prices start rising everywhere. This is why inflation driven by war feels so ruthless. It creeps into everything. Electronics, medicine, packaged food, cooking oil, car parts, construction materials, anything that crosses borders becomes vulnerable. People often blame local sellers for raising prices, but many times the pressure began much earlier in the chain, at the port, in the tanker market, in the energy contract, in the freight bill. Then comes food inflation, and this is where the pain gets personal. Energy is tied to agriculture more than most people realize. Fertilizer production depends heavily on natural gas, farm equipment runs on fuel, irrigation systems use electricity or diesel. Harvesting, storage, and transportation all cost more when energy prices jump. So even if a war is not happening anywhere near farmland, it can still make basic food items more expensive. That is why bread, rice, milk, eggs, and vegetables can rise in price after an energy shock. War raises the cost of moving the world, and food always pays the price. But the most dangerous part is what happens next: expectations. Inflation becomes much harder to stop when people start believing it will keep rising. Businesses begin increasing prices in advance to protect margins. Workers demand higher wages because they expect their living costs to go up. Investors start rethinking interest rate expectations. Central banks get trapped because they may want to support growth, but if inflation looks ready to rebound, they cannot relax too soon. That is what makes war-driven inflation so toxic. It creates a shock that central banks cannot easily fix. If inflation were only coming from strong consumer demand, higher rates could cool spending. But when inflation is being driven by supply disruptions, higher energy prices, and trade bottlenecks, monetary policy becomes a blunt weapon. It can slow the economy, yes, but it cannot reopen a shipping lane. It cannot stop missiles. It cannot pump more oil out of a disrupted region. And this is where the bigger risk appears: stagflation. That is the nightmare combination of slower growth and higher prices. Businesses struggle because costs rise. Consumers struggle because essentials get more expensive. Borrowing remains costly. Investment slows down, growth weakens, yet inflation refuses to disappear. It is the kind of environment that hurts almost everyone except those who are prepared for it. For ordinary people, the message is simple: if this kind of inflation returns, the first hit will come through essentials. Fuel, food, electricity, transportation, imported goods. And in many developing economies, the situation gets even worse because of currency weakness. If oil is priced in dollars and your local currency loses value, you get hit twice, once by the global shock and again by the exchange rate. That is how imported inflation becomes a full-scale domestic problem. Governments then face a brutal choice: subsidize prices and put pressure on public finances, or let prices rise and face public anger. Neither option is painless. Meanwhile, households are left trying to survive a world where wages move slowly, but costs move fast. So when people ask, is inflation really coming back? The answer is, it can. And this war may be the reason. Not because demand is booming, not because the economy is overheating, but because global conflict has a way of breaking the systems that keep prices stable. Oil, shipping, food, energy, confidence. Once those start cracking at the same time, inflation does not just come back, it comes back with force. So remember this: when someone says a war is far away, ask yourself one question: does it touch energy, trade, or transport? Because if it does, then it is not far away at all. It is already at the gas station, it is already in your electricity bill, it is already in your kitchen budget. And if this pressure continues, it may soon show up in every part of the economy.